Hello and welcome to the first installment of the HSE 4M special, where social justice and equity are placed at the forefront, giving you news on injustices committed around the world. I'm your host, Andre Ward, and today we're going to be talking about an issue that hits very close to home. It actually takes place in our home. Today we're going to be discussing the lack of fair education for immigrant children in Canada and just what its effects are on newly dubbed Canadian citizens and their kids. To begin discussing this issue, we first need to boil the issue down to its root causes. Oftentimes we forget that a problem this large can't just be solved by just getting down to the main issue and starting from there. We need to be able to deconstruct issues that contribute to the problem. After we fix these smaller issues that help make the problem what it is, the easier it will be to eliminate an issue as large as the denial of fair education for immigrant children. When we conducted a poll on our website, our readers had indicated that they felt a major issue when it comes to being able to educate children comes from the parents being able to support their families. This, of course, comes through employment opportunities for parents that have newly immigrated to Canada. I'd like to quote Margaret Eaton, who said, "Somehow in Canada, it's a funny contradiction. We pride ourselves on being so open to newcomers, but unfortunately, if someone's coming here and they haven't had that piece of Canadian experience, it goes against them." What she's trying to say is that she feels if someone hasn't yet been immersed in the culture or is, as we say, fresh off the boat, we tend to act as though it's not our job to welcome them, especially through employment opportunities. Waiting for someone else to do a job we should all be doing together definitely assists in making this problem worse than it needs to be. So the fact is, Canadian-born high school grads have a better show at a job than a university-educated recent immigrant. When a new immigrant comes to Canada, the adaptation to a new life is hard enough, and not being able to support their family adds a whole new stress level to their predicament. We've opened up the phones to callers who have decided to take it upon themselves to share their experiences with unemployment when they moved to Canada. On the line now, we have Mahmoud from Egypt. Mahmoud, what can you tell us about how you were received in terms of employment opportunities when you had first come to Canada?
Hi, Andre. I just wanted to call in with my story about how I was refused employment for the first 4 months while I was in Canada. I had to constantly ask my mother to send money over from Egypt just so my wife and I could feed our kids. I feel as though the reason for my trouble in the job search was my status as a new immigrant. Could this be true?
Thanks for the call, Mahmoud. That was a really fascinating story. I can't believe you were treated so poorly when Canada is normally seen as such an inviting country that accepts people from all different places. I think we should go further into detail as to why you were discriminated against while you were finding a job. I think a woman named Ratna Amidvar phrased it perfectly when she said, "Canadian employers are remarkably root-bound and fairly traditional in their modes of outreach, of selection, of hiring, and of assessment." So what she's trying to say is that because we're so hooked upon what we view as normal, we become less accepting of things that may seem not normal to us. So we're more prone to hire people of a more common background because employers feel as though there's less of a risk if they do so. The idea of taking a chance isn't something employers usually like to do, especially if their business is meeting expectations and is already making a name for itself. So why would they want to make that change? I can tell you, Mahmoud, you're definitely not alone. Some 4% of immigrants who come to Canada with a university degree are still without a job. This number is especially important because it solidifies the fact that these immigrants aren't less qualified, they simply just aren't being chosen for jobs. Another fact of the matter is that some companies don't recognize skills and credentials immigrants may have when they come to Canada, rendering their time and dedication to receiving a higher education useless when they pack their bags and come to Canada. So, the whole point of this talk show is to break down barriers, so we must ask, what can we do not only as individuals, but also as a country to solve this issue? Well, for starters, our government needs to compose a system that can match skilled workers with jobs they would succeed at before they come to Canada. This would provide ease of mind that would help plant their roots in Canada and make sure establishing a family as a Canadian citizen would become much easier than it is right now. We could also provide incentives to companies who look beyond the white Canadian that has lived in Canada all their life. This wouldn't only open up more job opportunities for people who are new to Canada, but it would diversify the companies that have been in Canada for generations. Another thing that can be done is for Canada to adopt a universal database that tracks the work experience, education, and other valuable credentials essential to making an informed decision about hiring a new immigrant to Canada. This makes sure that everybody is on an even playing field when it comes down to finding a job to support their families, and makes sure all their efforts don't go unnoticed, because really, who wants that to happen? Other major problems new immigrants commonly face when they come to Canada are the language barriers. Not being able to communicate with the rest of the country is a critical barrier that inhibits immigrants from finding their way and really puts a damper on the process of setting up their lives in a new country. This makes it hard for people to apply for healthcare, acquire driver's licenses, and so many other things we as native English and French speakers take for granted. Something that could be done to fix this issue would be to afford new immigrants the opportunity to attend free English or French classes depending on the area they're immigrating to help assist them with vital communication skills they're going to need to succeed as a new Canadian citizen. Now that we've discussed the underlying issues as to why immigrant children aren't getting the education they deserve, I think it's time we focus on the actual education itself. It says here that we have a caller on the line right now named Zoe, who has recently immigrated to Toronto from Spain, who'd like to share some of her stories and thoughts on the education system and how it works or doesn't work for immigrants.
Hey Andre, I just wanted to share my experience of immigrating to Canada from Spain. For my kids especially, adjusting to the new life we were going to have was very tough. The climate was very difficult to get used to, and getting into the healthcare system took forever. My kids were out of school for months because it took forever to get the proper Health Canada documentation to help them get into school. My oldest son, who's 11, also had an incredibly hard time fitting in at school. They say Canada is a very inviting place for people from all places, but this wasn't reflected when I came here. Why is this?
Thanks so much for the call, Zoe. I liked how you spoke about not just the issues we've already discussed, like underemployment of parents and language barriers, but also that you've talked about how you and your kids were somewhat in a state of shock when you came into Canada. The food, the climate, and culture is all so different, and that change is inevitable when transitioning to living in a new country. One of the main problems immigrant parents commonly face is getting their child into the healthcare system, necessary for them to go to school. This process could take months, depriving them of time they could be spent getting their education in the classroom. This delay can be contributed to the inefficiency of Health Canada's processing, which definitely needs to be fixed. Also, being from such a different cultural background than the societal norm, your kids must have felt like they weren't being understood, especially by their teachers. A lot of this comes through the expectations they have of each other. At such a critical time, such as the early development process of education when kids are 5 to 10, the fact that some kids aren't getting the proper education they deserve is inexcusable because this lack of understanding can be detrimental to their entire lives and their success as new Canadian citizens. Now, you said that your oldest son was 11 when he arrived, which I find particularly interesting. Because kids your son's age already had established their own social networks, whether it be within the school or beyond, it's a lot harder for kids in the same situation as your son to find a friend group they can confide in. Because their social groups are already so well built up, it's a lot harder for new people to enter into those groups. A lot of this comes back to the idea of people, especially kids, not being risk takers. Why would kids want to include somebody different when they're already happy with their current friend group? We need to educate our kids about the importance of inclusivity, especially for those who are so new. Another problem surrounding the stability of immigrant youth is the fact that family life so heavily contributes to their success. Another staggering fact is that 1/3 or 65,000 of Canada's homeless populations are youths, and of those, nearly 1/4 were born outside of Canada. The fact is, not having a support system that a close-knit family provides is detrimental to the opportunity for a child to succeed. Another staggering fact to note is that over 1 in 3 immigrants identified as LGBTQ. This is a very significant time in a person's life, and having someone to support you is crucial to not just the way others view you, but the way you view yourself. This lack of a support system also contributes to a very high suicide rate we see in children of recent immigrants. 2 out of 3 recent immigrants cited family conflict as the main reason for becoming homeless. This can be changed, however, as we can offer more support systems in our communities for people to confide in. While there may not be someone to guide them in life at home, we can at least offer assistance outside of the home to afford immigrants the tools they need to succeed. Now it says here that we have a call from a man named Saeed who had recently fled Syria with his wife and children, Mohammed and Yana, to escape the rampant violence that has been going on there. Saeed, how are you doing?
Hello, Andre. Yes, I just had recently gotten out of Syria, where I have lived my entire life. My son Mohammed and daughter Yana had recently been put into the Canadian school system here in Vancouver, where they are having a lot of problems adjusting to such a new life. Both Mohammed and Yana have seen terrible things from back when we were living in Syria, and it has been causing them to have quite a bit of difficulty focusing in class, and neither of them get very much sleep. Mohammed says his teachers don't understand him. Is there any way we can fix this?
I was actually hoping we'd have a caller with a story similar to yours, Saeed. Thanks so much for the call. Being from a part of the world with such high rates of brutality, I wouldn't be surprised to hear that your son and daughter have seen so much violence or even had been a victim of violence during the time you spent living in Syria. This definitely creates stress for families and children because it's so difficult to open up to people about the things you may have seen. Also, kids who have had to endure these kind of experiences often suffer from PTSD, causing a lack of sleep, aggressive behavior, and other terrible reactions detrimental to success for children. In terms of children who have been exposed to violence, I think the most important and valuable solution is to make sure school boards hire teachers who actually care and teachers who will listen to the problems their students may have. When a student is able to confide in somebody who holds a position of authority, such as a teacher, it helps make them feel safe. It's also really important for kids to see people in similar situations as them reflected in the curriculum taught in schools. Looking at most of the textbooks I grew up with, there wasn't much diversity in the textbooks we learned from. I'll admit they are getting better as of late, but it's not yet where it needs to be. Perhaps getting textbooks to reflect kids from all around the world and kids from different situations would provide kids the encouragement they need to succeed. Well, we're running out of time here at the HSE 4M studios. I'd like to extend a big thank you to all the callers we've heard from today. Your stories were greatly appreciated and have really helped to segue into some really important issues and some great solutions to these problems. I've proposed a bill and a petition for the fair education of all immigrant children that's going to be passed around to our studio audience. They'll all be given a digital copy, and their challenge from me is to send it to as many people as they can to help spark a positive change in the way immigrant children are being educated here in Canada. We've talked about a lot of problems on the show, and I think we've come up with some great solutions to these problems. Once again, I'm your host, Andre Ward, from the HSE 4M studios, signing off.